Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum. Ji ayanu, pakhair agale, ni hao, chunashumme, washmale. Ohaya Gonzaimas, Guten Morgen, hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba, buna, mucho gracias, swabia, bhalli kare aaya. Hoş geldin and ayo huyamora, chivato, chihajo, kalimera. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and watching World this morning. Alongside my very well-learned colleague who happens to be Miss Hajar Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Hassan Khan, and it looks like as if the weather is changing. And there's a reason why I'm saying so, but first things first. Hello Hajra, Assalamu Alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum Assalam. Thank you so much, Shahzad, for introducing me. Weather is certainly changing. I think we are finally transitioning towards the autumn, I guess. So, because the humidity level has shrunken a lot, and the weather is generally very nice and pleasant, especially in the evenings, because you can feel the gentle breeze. And living in Islamabad, I think this is the best thing about the beauty of the nature that we can enjoy. And I think that is the reason why back in 1960s, the Islam capital was shifted from Karachi to Islamabad because of the weather. It was very moderate, it's very green, it's very cool, it's very fine.
But that can't really be the only reason, and it's because of the fact that, last weekend, not this weekend, but the weekend prior to this one, I was in Karachi, and it was the perfect t-shirt weather over there. It wasn't humid, it was windy, and I felt as if, I'm on top of my game. But not just that, whenever we are to kind of speak about Islamabad's weather, obviously it's fantastic. But the core reason why I was talking about it was that just yesterday after my gym, I went back home, I was wearing this sleeveless shirt and I was on my terrace. And I loved every bit of it, and it was a little chilly though. I was like, okay, it's not warm, but it's a little chilly. So I think that, ladies and gentlemen, let's open up, let's be more hopeful. But there's one thing, Haja, which I wanted to ask you, and that is that, so unfortunately in these times of distress where there's so much of inflation in the country, a lot of people certainly are below the poverty line, and there are a lot of people who certainly need our help. And, people aren't actually asking for it because of the fact that their morals do not allow them. And the kind of personality and the character they have, they certainly do not want to ask from any human, rather they would ask from Allah Almighty. But have you ever been giving loan to somebody, to a friend of yours? Or do you think that, okay, he or she might be in need, and okay, that, I should actually give them a bit of money?
I mean, I wouldn't categorize it as a loan, but yes, I have been generally helping people, especially the helpers in our household, because obviously, like you talked about, there's a very distressing time. And I think if we are well off, if we are earning well, and if we cannot help the community.
That's a question too, if we are earning well.
Yes, if we cannot help our community, Alhamdulillah.
Can't complain.
So, so I think that would be very ungrateful of us, and we are not paying our debt on living in this country and on this planet that we call Earth in the first place, because this is the role of the nature, this is the rule of the nature, that nature does not live for itself, it always lives for others, right? So I always keep talking about how the water does not flow for itself, we benefit from the water, flora and fauna benefit from the water. A tree does not provide shade and flowers for itself, it provides it for the birds, for other animals to live, for us humans to eat it. And similarly, there can be lots of other reasons or lots of another analogies that I can draw, but I think if you have the money, just give it away to a lot of people because they are in distress, and do not give it away with the sense that you want it back, because just make this pledge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah will give you back many-fold, multifold.
चलो एक बंदा तो मुझे मिल गया ना जिससे मैं उधार मांग सकता हूँ. If God forbid.
Chocolates तो मुझे मिली नहीं है, पर
If God forbid I have ever to ask for a loan money, but Allah Mia, please, please make sure that nobody has to kind of come down over there. But there was a reason why I asked you this question. So Allah has actually given us, in fact, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as per the guidance of Allah Almighty, has given us, the rule of how to kind of invest. So imagine that, ladies and gentlemen, first the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that nobody is going to get poor by giving sadaqah and zakat. Number one. So, and your mal is going to increase many folds, and this is something which we have witnessed to, alhamdulillah.
Right.
Number two, the first person whom you are supposed to kind of spend on is your parents. Okay, number one. Number two is your children and your wife. Number three is your extended family, your chachus, your mamus, anybody in the family. Number four is your friends. Number five is people who work with you, who serve you, your domestic staff. And number six, towards the end, Allah Pak says that if you've given it to everybody and you still have money and you want to give more, give it in my name. So please make sure that that you always extend this hand of help, and Allah will make you more rich. So please make sure that you do this with firm faith and firm belief. So the only amount of money that you're supposed to give as a loan should be the money which you never get back. You shouldn't really be bothered about it.
I think that's a recommendation. It's not obligatory on it, right?
That's a recommendation.
So I think we should keep in mind, because if you are driving and if you see some laborer or any person who is extreme distress, so do not apply this rule. Just immediately give that money away, so that person can have a sense of relief and he can consider you as an agent of God who has been there to help you.
And our religion tells us repeatedly that give as much as you can afford to live your life in a better way as well. You know, it's not that you give everything away and then later on you're asking Allah Almighty, Allah please, so please make sure that you do that. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, moving on towards our topic. So Hajra, obviously when we talk about theatre, when we talk about acting, direction, you know, it never comes handy, you know. So a lot of people have a lot of research exposure, they travel, you know, all over the world to make sure that they bring the best theatre, you know, because if we go back in the 18th century, theatre was actually used to make sure that we kind of encourage, not just encourage, but give them that exposure, you know, those societal changes which were required. Theatre was the medium which people used to use, you know, to make sure that they're going to get their messages across. And today we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by somebody who's got a big name, ladies and gentlemen, and his medium of writing is English, and we will certainly be having this profile interview with him, because imagine that what he has done. So I'm going to just take a minute. So he made sure that he's going to actually, so his written plays, a lot of them, you know, The Guild, The Last Metaphor, The Odyssey. So The Guild and The Last Metaphor was actually adopted by Higher Education Commission for the MPhil students. Not just that, in addition to that, you know, he made sure that, you know, so there was another play, Speaking Silence, and Shah Jahan actually happens to be the first Pakistani awarded by the American president for his contribution to drama and theatre. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've been joined by Mr. Usman Ali Shah Jahan. Hello, Assalamu Alaikum. How are you doing today?
Walaikum Assalam. How are you, Shahzad? How are you, Hajra?
Thank you.
Absolutely perfect. And thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor for us to have such an amazing celebrity all the way from Mandi Baldin over here.
I think Mandi Baldin excites Shahzad a lot, because he keep talking about Mandi Baldin, food and whatnot. Because obviously
it's like a second village to me.
Strong connection with there. But let's kickstart a conversation. So since you are very much invested into the playwright, how is this genre different from other forms of the literary expressions that we can find?
You know, in drama we have a dialogue. We need a stage actually, and it's very much a public medium. Whereas poetry, fiction, and other forms, they are personal in a sense. You don't need to actually put them on stage. But when you write drama, it means it is the people talking to one another. And it got to be on stage and people watching it. So that's how I think that drama is very much different from poetry and from fiction, because very much a public medium.
Yeah, and thank you so much for saying that. But you know, when we talk about fiction, when we talk about action, when we talk about romance, how do you think playwright is a very different genre for a person like you and for anybody else?
You know, if we look at the craft, for example, if I try to answer your question in terms of craft, it's very different. When we write poetry, when we write fiction, the poem, the novel can be edited at home. But in order to edit drama, you need to go to rehearsals. And you know, I did my research on Derek Walcott, and I could never understand that Walcott took his typewriter to rehearsals until I started writing my own plays. And in the last days, we had a walkway, and we did Last Metaphor, and I was carrying my own notebook to the rehearsals. So I would watch the play and I would edit it. So actual editing and rewriting of drama is very, very much different from poetry and fiction in terms of craft.
Exactly. And there's an interesting bit to it as well. So, you know, you were born with the name Usman Ali, right? You know, Shah Jahan wasn't really your name. So is it like a stage name that you wanted people to know you by, or, you know, is it like a director's thing that, okay, hey, you know what, I'm a big director now, you know, so please call me Usman Ali Shah Jahan. How do you know, because we never got a chance. So for example, if my name is Shahzad Hasan Khan, nobody gave me an idea that, okay, yaar, iske aage Shah Jahan bhi laga lo ya kuch aur laga lo.
So why did you do that? Name sort of takhallus?
It is not a pen name, yes. It is primarily my mother's name.
MashaAllah.
And you know, generally in our patriarchal culture, people are love to be known by their castes or by their father's names.
Gondal.
Absolutely.
Rane.
Absolutely.
Vattu.
Absolutely.
Chaudhary.
Absolutely.
Malak.
So I prefer to be called by my mother's name.
Mashallah.
I love more when somebody calls me Shah Jahan. So that the name I have added because it takes longer to understand what your mother has done, because I think in my work, as Edward Bond talks about, there's a lot of compassion. And I learned compassion from my mother. And you know why my mother was different from other mothers? Generally, it's my observation. Every mother takes care of her kids, but my mother was kind of Balkis Idi type woman, who didn't only take care of her kids, she also took care of the kids, of the girls, of the people, of the mohalla also, of the society also. And you know, it's very interesting that she would tell me stories of all the people suffering or dying in our community. And I still can't actually believe how she remembered in minute details. She remembers their names. They were not her relatives.
Wow. So you felt it from her heart, always.
Yes, I mean that unknowingly and mysteriously, that compassion and empathy, I think they were transferred to me. I think it's because of because of Shah Jahan, because of my mother.
Of associating yourself with a very feminine characteristics or motherhood in the first place. But let's talk about some of the themes that are present in your plays, right? And political satire is one of them. So would you like elaborating on them?
Absolutely. You know, I generally, to a great extent, you know, I feel critical of our television drama. In a sense, romance, you know, is often dealt with, and mostly in a very superficial way.
True.
So because it's consumed, we're living in a capitalist society, it is sold, that's fine. But I think what is happening on the roads in Pakistan, that is super important. For example, in my play The Guilt, I try to commemorate the great Pakistani comedian Mastana, who died a miserable death, and how he left stage because he was slapped by a policeman. So a man who was so strong on stage, how he crumbled because he was humiliated. So our culture thrives on humiliating others. So I think that needs to be investigated.
True.
And in that play, The Guilt, in fact, I have been exploring how the people are humiliated and how does humiliation does to you. And if I come to last metaphor, suppose, you know, there is a very simple play. You know, a character who is a robber, he's crossing a road and there is a dog crushed by a van, and instantly he's connected with that dog. He wishes to bury the dog because he thinks dog is also a creature. It also needs to be acknowledged. So his whole struggle is to acknowledge the dog and to bury it, and in that journey he also begins to understand himself and the other human beings
but
also.
Usman, we've seen that especially artists often complain about how they are not respected enough, and they are not their talent is not given the appreciation that they deserve, and especially after their death, then people start talking about it and they're not given enough respect when they are living. So in Pakistan we do hear that, but since you have an exposure in the USA, do you think that this scene is also the same replicated in the USA, or is it different
globally
from there? And globally, what do you think about the artist fraternity in general and their recognition that they deserve, which do they not
You know,
get?
there are several opportunities in the US. You meet a bus driver, he or she has also written a book. Yes, there in every other coffee shop you are having people who are talking about books, who are talking about reading. And unfortunately, our culture, let me say the word, our culture is a big lie, the way I look at my own culture. There are creators in our culture, not only a one creator. I mean, there are battalions of creators. Actually, it does not actually nourish new voices in particular, you know, and you can find a kind of elite everywhere, whether it is the academia, whether it is the
whether they are or not, but they claim to fame
whether the publishing houses, you know, one of the problems I get, for example, whenever I email to people, look, this is my work, and I am not naming, but they are most prestigious publication houses. One word they would come up with, where do you live? And I would say I live in Mandi Bhaudin, and suddenly like they got fever by hearing that name. And if somebody is living in London, somebody is living in New York, somebody is living in Melbourne, somebody is living in Islamabad, Karachi, somewhere in metropolitan city, suddenly his acceptance grows.
The elitism is there.
So actually, still still we are, Hajra, at a level where we measure not only people, writers also, by the place where they live.
And
so
and
that is, I'm so sorry, it is so ironic.
Because Haja, what you asked actually kind of reminded me of something. So imagine that I was in Universal Studios, Los Angeles in US in 2015 or 16.
Okay.
And so we were on a tour and we had this, the caddy driver over there.
Yeah.
So I was in conversation with him. I was more friendly and I was like, okay, what's going on and whatnot. So he was like, okay, why don't you share your Insta handle with me? I was like, yeah, this is my Insta handle. So imagine that caddy driver actually had more followers than me. So on every level, people have a lot of respect for their people. May them be drivers, may them be cleaners, may them be CEOs. They show the same level of respect to everybody. They do not judge and behave according to what position they hold. And this is something which I learned from there, and I've tried that, I practice it in my life. But in addition to this, there must be a reason for you to write now, so what is that reason? Because, you've highlighted a few ironies, you've highlighted, a few problems within the society and community, and most of the time theatre is one of those mediums with which people used to kind of make sure that this is the message that we need to get across. So what influenced you to write? And, for somebody who hails from Mandi Baudin, this unfortunately is the perception that, okay, yaar, he's an English playwright, so that's one thing. So how do you debuckle that?
Shehzad, I was vulnerable, I was compassionate, I was empathetic, I was sensitive, but I didn't know what to do with myself. But when I met this brilliant teacher, she is Professor Shaista Sonu Sirajuddin at Punjab University. When I saw her in my first class, there is a beautiful poem, Thought Fox by Ted Hughes, and he says, I imagine midnight moments forest, something else is alive. Wow. When I saw this brilliant woman, I felt something else is also alive, So I think I was connected to that energy, and she always wanted her students to become writers. Shehzad, I felt actually she respected quality writers more than anybody else. Many people talk about art, but we don't get the conviction from them that they really care about the art. I think from Ms. Sirajuddin, what we learned is that genuine art is capable of redressing society, as Seamus Heaney puts it in Redress of Poetry. So that's why I dedicate my all praise to Professor Shaista Sonu Sirajuddin.
Right, and let's talk about the language of the medium, and which is the English, right? There's a lot of, this discourse, I would say predominant discourse that Pakistani people are not much invested in the English language, and especially when we talk about the
we don't
playwrights.
Like to read and write.
Yes, of course. And
that's the problem.
And especially when we talk about the theatre plays, they're mostly in the Punjabi or English, like Shehzad was mentioning about it. Exactly. But now, since you are focusing on the English play, do you think that there's a scope for that? There's a vibrant market out there in Pakistan.
Especially hailing from Mandi Baudin.
Yeah, Hajan, it's a very good question. I must, I think, appreciate it's a very fine question, and it's a debate also in academia also and everywhere also. I have acted not only in the US, in Pakistan. We are talking about Pakistan. In the last bit of fur and a walkway we did, audience responded very well to the English language. I don't think it's what I feel is we are born into a language. Look, I don't believe in mother tongue. Generally people say Urdu is my mother tongue. Well, you are born into a tongue. You can born into any language at any moment. That's what I feel like. So I rather go with Walcott's, languages are properties of imagination, So I feel you can born into a language. So for me, English, Urdu, Punjabi, for me, there are various creative expressions, and you can actually write them, you can create in them. In my experience, I have actually overcome the barrier of English language. Generally people say that in English is not our language, but in my experience, Hajra, when you say something with sincerity, with truth and integrity, even you are talking in French or Chinese, your expression, your words talk.
Okay, that's understood.
So the audience responded very well.
That's understood, because you're not just kind of saying it, but you're acting. There are a lot of people, so the gestures kind of speak quite a lot, non-verbal, verbal communication. But over here in Pakistan, we have seen that, Punjabi theatre, we have seen it survive, not just survive, but alhamdulillah, they've taken over the entire globe. So imagine that, a Punjabi artist from Pakistan is now performing elsewhere in all over the world. And that's something which is beautiful to see. But do you see that, that this is exactly how people of Pakistan are going to reciprocate with theatre in English? Because we've had a lot of theatres over here in English. I think Dawar Mahmood has done wonderful job. Not just that, Usman Khalid Bhatt, I think I believe has done a wonderful job. Mavra, Urva, all of these people, Hamza Ali, Basi, because we've been together.
Copyright.
Yeah, so everybody has done a great job, and there was this market for English theatre in at least in Lahore, Islamabad and Karachi. But now for you to be an English playwright, do you think that it has a far better scope than how it was previously? Do you think people now want to kind of listen more to English theatre and enjoy it more?
There are various dimensions to your question.
Sure.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I think that first is, first I don't prefer one language to another. It is the writer who has to decide in which language he wants to create.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, in scope, for me, the scope is a human being. I want to talk to a human being. That is the scope for me. First scope is, do my work touch you? Do my characters talk to you?
Yeah.
Am I able to connect to some part of you, Shahzad, in some way? So that is my scope. Third scope, I think you are talking from the commercial purpose.
True.
And
because okay, I'll give you a reference, right? Because I've seen, because we do work with a lot of work with music industry. We do shows all over the country and all over the globe. But my question is that, that I come across a few singers that, okay, they do sing, but there's no commercial purpose to it, because people, when they come to concerts, they want to dance, bhangra and whatnot. They want to enjoy their time. So most of the time, whenever I'm in, I ask them that why don't you do music which is more commercially adopted by people so that you can get more concerts, and it's a business model. So they're like, we do music for ourselves. If you do for yourself, why don't you just go at home and then play for yourself? Now, why are you out there for the audiences? Because the audiences get bored. So as an anchor or as a host, I want the audience to be kind of happy, joyful, enjoying themselves. So for you to be an English playwright, do you see that, okay, that's what people want and I'll keep on giving that from a commercial point of view?
Shehzad, I have also a problem with the word entertainment.
Okay.
When people say
what's the problem with that?
We want entertainment.
Tafree chahiye hame. Karachi mein kehte hain.
If purposeless entertainment, meaningless as like humor, if it is not a purposeful, what would you do? And again, I'm reminded of Bond. Do you come to theatre for entertainment? Why you go to a hospital? You go to a hospital because you need to be cured.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I've never been to a theatre not thinking that, okay, I'm going to learn something. I go to theatre with friends, with popcorn, so okay, this is my off times, I want to enjoy.
Because we want to produce shallow entertainment, which has nothing to do. And because we think that it survives commercially, well, I also object to that. There must be a way to survive commercially also if you strive enough.
Thank you so much.
But mostly people are carried by ideology, prevalent ideology. So it is very difficult to challenge some ideology by living within that particular culture. So it's more like a capitalism that you always, entertainment is sold. Look at cinema, look modern television, look all around the world. They're very much
OTT platforms.
And Shehzad, why I don't write television? I don't write for film. For me, I still feel that on stage technology is not involved. Look, I'm talking to you, you are talking to me. Here, like we are an actor and an audience. But when you are actually looking at somebody through your cell phone or through your or on a film, technology is involved.
And there are lots of filters that are involved. So, and that's very concerning. But now let's move on to one last question where we want to talk about the gender roles that are prevalent in modern day entertainment, be in our pop culture, in our dramas, in our films and whatnot, and the bifurcation which they present, especially in the gender roles. A lot of people have a problem with that. There's a lot of criticism that is garnered over that. For example, they depict a bichari aurat and they do not have a very powerful roles as compared to the playwrights that were produced back in the old days of PTV, when there were very powerful characters, very powerful women who were doing their work, and also also there.
Passe Aina, Rubina Ashraf Sahiba, yes.
Exactly, and which we do not find it in the modern conception of the entertainment, right? So what is your view on that, and how do you believe in being a change agent, especially through your playwrights, and what sort of messages would you like to give?
And you know, the one word is your change, where you and your question. You know, change, it could be a degree of change. It could be where you could maybe touch somebody, number one. No, I don't claim to change anything. I put sincerely something on stage, and I can never know what can happen to your mind when you are watching it, you are thinking it. Number one. Number two, I think our drama, our stories need to move out of this bechari aurat, bechara mard, zalim mard, whatever you are talking about. I think, I'm sorry, our plays are confined to a room. Yes, I think they need to come out. They need to branch out, and they should come out on a road. You know, and then I think you learn to redefine a lot of things. You know, and about the gender roles also. You know, at times I feel that ideology is very subtle, Hajra. At times you can perpetuate gender roles. At times you challenge gender roles in order to continue the prevalent ideology. So at times I think the best technique is actually to come up with a new story.
Exactly.
So that we can have
fresh content,
new story,
through competition, we can
new image, new image, you know. So like, for example, if I talk about my play Walkway, I talk about my play A Cup of Tea. A Cup of Tea is about two policemen who are fiddling with the masks. My plays deal with Corona also. What happened during Corona? What happened to people? When people were getting money also, actually. You know, if you could tell somebody that this person is diagnosed with COVID-19. So actually, and how the masks, how the policemen having their own frustration, they got their own stories. So I think, and I've also written a beautiful play called This is a University. I'm also talking about academic culture also. I think we need new stories coming out of these gender roles.
And
that's my take on it.
And we certainly need directors, actors and writers like you. So thank you so much, Usman Ali Shah Jahan Saab, for being with us. But towards the end, there's one thing which I would want to say, and that too for you, and that is for all of the people who are out there as well, you know, as lovely audiences. So, लगता है जैसे मैं वक्त हो गया हूँ और तुम कयामत. लगता है जैसे मैं वक्त हो गया हूं और तुम कयामत. सदियों से बस एक उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की. सदियों से बस एक उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की जो रुकनी नहीं देती मुझे. मैं वक्त हो गया हूं तुम कयामत. सदियों से उम्मीद है तुम्हें पाने की जो रुकने नहीं देती मुझे. यकीन है कि तुम आओगे एक दिन. दावा है मेरा कयामत होगी उस दिन. Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading out towards a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Okay, welcome back, and we were having a very interesting conversation before going on to the break, in the break, and now we will have a very interesting conversation.
Can't even share what we were talking about during the break.
Would you like to do the honors? Because Shehzad is saying that, you know, he loves to dance around, and he can even dance on the tone of the motor. He has so much electricity within himself. But that was on the lighter note, of course. And we are going to talk about some homegrown applications, and obviously applications occupy a very important and central part in our life, and especially in our digital fabric, because we have lots of apps on our mobile phones. And when we talk about homegrown apps, what does that entail? And especially in the digital century, in a country like Pakistan, which is very vibrant digitally, and it's the fastest growing market for all of these technologies in the first place. So without any further ado, we would like to introduce our guest. We're very glad that we have been joined by Dr. Aisha Nazuk. She happens to be an associate professor of the university which I also belong to, that is NAS. So assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
अब तो मुझे लगता है मेरी भी रिश्तेदारी हो गई NAS के साथ. Alhamdulillah, but it's wonderful to have you here over again. And that to talk about a topic which is always very close to me and Hajra and our entire team, because we've been talking about it, that it's only the 1% of the total population of the world who's going to get newer ideas, and then the rest 99% are supposed to copy it. And obviously, for as a reference point, we do know that over here in Pakistan, for example, globally there was Uber, then Kareem came down over here.
True.
Not just that, so whenever we talk about all of these bigger franchises coming down to Pakistan, there's always a slighter change in the flavor, whatnot, according to the geoeconomics of the country. And while we are talking about it, so obviously it has to do a lot with cultural references. We go to China, they have their own Facebook, they have their own WhatsApp. In fact, we might be even having our own WhatsApp away in Pakistan as well. So first up, the importance of homegrown apps and the benefits of homegrown apps, and then we'll continue with our conversation.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction and setting the launching ground for the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, I will start my discussion from an important, something that I celebrate. If you have a good neighbor, you shouldn't be, jealous, or it puts good peer pressure on you.
Obviously.
So if you are following this news about the cyberspace, India has opened, Government of India has opened bids for, they have called for the bids for developing their own browser.
Okay.
Right. So why is that important? Because whatever you put on the cyberspace it's a data, it's an information.
Yep.
So whatever you are putting on the cyberspace, and if the browser is not owned by your country or your IT infrastructure is not indigenous, then you're always vulnerable.
Okay.
You're always vulnerable to cyber crimes, malware attack, everything, right?
True.
So apps is just a small component of the entire cyberspace, right? We should, I think about developing our own browser, and then we should also think about developing our own apps, and the apps should reflect our priorities as well.
But we do have homegrown apps, no? It's not like that we do not have, we are not working on that. We have very vibrant minds who are constantly working it out there, creating their names, and we often hear that they're hired by this company, especially by the Silicon Valley. But obviously when you're talking about the apps, there are lots of concerns about the data security, data privacy, data sovereignty, because obviously the data can be leaked, and we have seen there are plenty of cases where data has been leaked before, right? So when we talk about the homegrown apps, how do you address this concern about the data sovereignty and data privacy in the first place?
Okay, since I'm a teacher, I'll explain with a very good example.
Sure, go ahead.
These apps are my hands, right? So if I develop them through some technology using my own resources, but my backbone is not owned by me, what will happen?
Well, I think that you can, any day you can fall down, because if you don't have a backbone, there's no use of anything else.
See, you got 10 by 10.
Thank you so much, madam.
Because you see, Pakistan lacks an internet backbone.
Yeah.
That's the crucial problem. We don't have internet backbone, and on top of that, if we don't have good apps, I'm not saying we don't have, we have apps, but see what type of apps we have. By the way, it was a pleasure to note just yesterday that we even have a navigation app. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
The name is Chalo.
Okay.
So we can navigate at least within the country. I'm not sure, because
like a Google map?
Like a Google map, but it's just for Pakistan, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
and the similar model I've seen in UK as well. So they use Waze, other than Google Maps, what they do is they use Waze. And why do they use Waze? Because there's a lot of traffic jam in England most of the time. So Waze will actually tell you that which nook and corner can take you in time to your next destination. It's a good debate that we're talking about it. But I certainly want to bring the conversation. I want to funnel it up to homegrown apps, because there's this culture now, and I have a lot of people. Even my younger brothers has actually made an app which goes with the name of PYT. And what it does is that, because you cannot lock your phone while you're playing anything on YouTube. So if you are going to play it from PYT, any YouTube video, you can lock your phone. So that's, people are coming up with smarter ways.
Great.
It's good. What are the benefits? So this is for our audiences, so that we can reach out in time, and so that they can decide, okay, I have this brilliant idea, and let's make our own app. So why do you think it's important for us? One, obviously security, that's something which is very important. We have our own iCloud sort of a product over here, Jazz Garage, I think is the name, and so people really can use it. But there needs to be more of awareness. How do you think, and what benefits will we garner if we are going to have our own apps?
Okay, I will once again start with a very basic question.
Sure.
Do you need money for survival?
No.
Okay.
I need
so generally, but I need it.
Okay, mashallah.
I mean, everyone needs it. Money is an important.
Please.
When I'll get, I'll share. Right now, I'm short of it.
Okay, it's wonderful.
Anyhow, so you know, if we are developing apps and they're homegrown, any sane mind could easily program that. You'll get the money out of it. Your app is being used, so you'll get the developer will be benefited, right? So even if you think materialistically for a while, it's beneficial.
True.
And now you put the materialistic side aside. Even if you are patriotic, you're helping your country.
True.
Because you are helping the national data to be in the national database.
True.
Rather than being leaked onto, let's say, Google or other important tech giants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason why I asked you this question was because my question is always multi-tier. So the reason was that number one, because now we see the model in China prevailing, and that is that they're going to have their own Facebook, they'll have their own WhatsApp. So they're securing it. Number one, I think that the disadvantage is that, you know, that the majority of the people are on WhatsApp, which we are using globally. And, you know, I believe that, you know, that's how it needs to be, so that wherever you may go, you know, there's no communication hindrances. Number two, don't you think that when a government decides that, okay, you're only going to use homegrown apps, will actually have a disadvantage of you not being connected to the rest of the world? Number one. Number two, that the government is trying to control your freedom of speech. Number three, that they do not want your version of life to go out to the rest of the world. You know, imagine what, you know, so there's multiple examples of it. Don't you think that there are disadvantages of only using homegrown apps?
Okay, first of all, you're too much used to putting question packed, I mean, set of question packed up in one sentence.
Yes, madam, yes.
And you use ubiquitous phrases loaded with, you know, fancy terms to put me in trouble.
You know, that's what my job is.
But I'm also a professor.
Yes, that's
so
why.
I'm going to put you in, bracket you in trouble as well.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, that just was on a light.
Okay.
So, you know, extreme or extent of everything is bad.
Okay.
Over-regulation and no regulation.
True.
If you think of your own home, you don't regulate anything, what will happen? You can imagine.
अम्मी बाहर नहीं जाने देती थी दोपहर को बचपन में. पूछता ही रह गया, मैं कह रही मैं नहीं बता रही.
बेटा आपने मेरे ज़्यादा मार नहीं खाई है.
अच्छा, ठीक है, okay, then please.
ये है. So anyhow, so a lot of regulation and no regulations. They are both the extreme end. Okay. But there is always an optimum blend. No one is saying that government of Pakistan should impose that we should only use homegrown apps. But on the same side, we shouldn't have monopoly.
Okay.
Like only big giants, tech giants, they are offering the app. Why not open competition and let the user choose for themselves?
True.
I think this is happening, no?
To some extent.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's not happening, but we need to scale up.
Okay.
And how much of cultural relevance do you think that we can get by using homegrown apps only?
Can you you know, elaborate
so
a bit?
For example, you know, there's this culture that, okay, you know, my wife shouldn't really be video calling me when I'm with my friends and whatnot, you know, so there's always a cultural relevance to any application that you're using.
True.
For example, over here on Kareem, what happens is that, you know, you can call the driver anonymously and you can choose to kind of give him or her your number, you know, so that's one thing. It's a cultural relevance over here. No? So if it's a lady, obviously she does not want to give her a number, and that's how they're using it. So do you think that, you know, with homegrown apps, there's more cultural relevance, you know, people are more comfortable in using it? Do you think that there's this advantage of homegrown apps that people can take?
Familiarize with the context of Pakistan in particular.
I think for the time being, whatever I will say will be more of a hypothetical answer.
But that's going to be an agent of change, now, because we're going to talk about it, and talking about something which is going to get us greater benefit.
Exactly. But once, I mean, I can't give you a solid answer right now, because once you launch the app, then you get to see the public response. Sometime it firebacks.
Yeah. But we are certainly sure that it's going to support local talent, that it's going to bring in more innovation.
You can't stop a competition just by imagining the negative repercussions, right?
True.
So you have to set the playing field and then see what are the outcomes.
Exactly. So do you think that we have that playing field over here for people to make their own applications and for them to be successful?
You have seen countless stories. Even yesterday I was saying I mean, sorry for the choice of word, but differently abled female of Pakistan. She's been hired in IBM SPSS as in the data wing.
Mashallah.
I'm forgetting the exact title. But we have the acumen and we have the type of intelligence required to, and there are countless examples of Pakistanis being ingrained into the global market on top-notch seats as well. So there is no brain drain of intelligence or IQ.
Right, because it's more global now, no? It's more of a global thing. So if somebody is kind of going and heading Facebook today, it certainly is giving us a lot of advantage, right?
Yes.
You know, because there's somebody sitting over there, we using Facebook here, it's okay.
Obviously, and sort of international diffusion does occur to Pakistan, but when we talk about the infrastructure here, do you think it's very supportive in the first sense? Because we have lots of vibrant Pakistanis, and obviously that is why, because Google wants to invest in Pakistan, they want to open their offices here, and YouTube is the fastest growing market in the Pakistan. So we do have a very fertile ground here, right? And we see that there are lots of government infrastructure which is supporting there. But what sort of gaps do you envision when we talk about homegrown apps in Pakistan in the first place?
I think that first of all, I will relate the whole discussion with the idea of entrepreneurship. We are even lagging behind in the field of entrepreneurship, right? We need to create an entrepreneurial mind, and one step ahead is technopreneurs. So what is that? There has to be an optimum blend of entrepreneurship with the technical acumen required to, you know, at least have the awareness that we need our own infrastructure, or we need our digital cyberspace. Right. There are many people who would not even realize why is it important to have it. Because even at the school or college level, by the way, okay, let me discuss one thing that it's a good news that in NAS there is a you know, business person from USA, Tanveer Ahmad or Tanveer something is the name, probably Tanveer Khan.
Tanveer bhai, assalamu alaikum.
He has, you know, he has been very generously offered to develop a something twin to the science and technology park type of building. 50% of its budget will be attributed to the NUST endowment fund, and the students can, who cannot afford the fee, they can pay. Why? I mean, seemingly it seems that I'm digressing from the topic. No, I'm not. Let me input something into it.
You're giving us that workforce which we require to make homegrown apps.
Exactly, and we can, you know, even if we can, NUST can take this initiative, by the way. Like they can put a cap on it that 5% of it, the endowment fund will be specifically for those who develop something to empower the cyberspace of Pakistan.
Exactly, and thank you so much for saying that, because I do remember, obviously it's going to be a smaller chunk. We need more people who are more scaled, you know, who know what they're doing, because imagine one of my friends who happens to be a database engineer. I never knew what a database engineer was. Even he never knew. So imagine that he got a job, he landed himself in a job. So this gentleman, his boss comes up and he's like, okay, you know, there's this 1500 entries. Please make sure that you enter it into the database. So the gentleman started at somewhere around 11 a.m. in the morning, and you know, so his boss comes back at somewhere around 6 or 7 p.m. and he's on probably the 120th entry. So he was like, so the boss comes in, he was like, Arslan, what are you doing? He was like, okay, sir, you know, you gave me that task, so I'm doing my entry. So, you know, all of a sudden the boss leans onto the keyboard, puts in a formula, and all of a sudden all those 1500 entries are in the computer, in the database.
And this is how technology helps us, right?
And that's how people really need to be skilled. You know, imagine, so he was a graduate of a very nice university, amazing university, but he never knew what to do. So universities really need to focus that they kind of be that agent which are going to bridge those gaps in between academia and the people who are working on it and in the market, and that's the way forward. But thank you so much, Dr. Saiba, for being with us. It was lovely to be in conversation with you, and we certainly need more people like you who talk about information technology, because that's the need of the hour.
That's true, and with that we will say goodbye, Allah Hafiz, and until next time.
1, 2, 3, good morning. Have a great day.